I don't think it's about fun as much for him. I think football is fun for him. I
True.
just think he likes everything about football. I think he felt a necessity to work with the receivers last year. Like I would joke in training camp, he'd spent so much time with the receivers. I'd go, he does realize he's the head coach, right? I mean, he's out there. He was pretty much Aaron Moorhead and Nick Sirianni You could tell he was invested on getting this group better. Um, I don't know if they got better between you and me. I mean, Devontae's Devontae.
You got Maga Mac here with you on Birds 365. John McMullen, Jody McDonald, getting you prepped for the beginning of the season. And the Eagles are actually reporting today. They'll get their first true workout tomorrow. And John and his buddies like Chris Franklin and the BLG will actually get to go out and pick up some tidbits on what the Eagles start of the season is going to look like. You're going to get your first chance to talk to Nick Sirianni, quote unquote, in season. Had a couple of sessions during the off season, during the OTAs and the like, and at least from what I saw, and I'm just seeing clips, you were actually there, you got to witness firsthand, seemed more relaxed. Is that a fair thing to say about the Eagles' second-year coach?
Oh yeah, I mean we talk about it all the time. With players, the most improvement is expected between the first and second year. And a lot of that is tied to just comfortability because think about it, you're usually moving, you know, wherever you go to college, Alabama, you're moving to Philadelphia for the first time. You're trying to get your feet on the ground. You're typically a very young person. Everything can be a little bit overwhelming. Then you got to go to work. You got to learn about your job. It's just common sense. Everybody gets a little bit more comfortable. Same thing for a rookie head coach. Um, now Nick is settled in a certain South Jersey town, trying to talk trash with other tennis players. Yeah, he's feeling more comfortable, and he's feeling more comfortable with the job and his team. He admitted he learned on the fly, as everyone does with that job. There's no experience. You can talk about being a coordinator. You can talk about being um, in charge of one side of the ball. One thing I've talked to a lot of coaches, and I've said this to you before, Jody. One thing they've all had in common, every single one of them, when they get to be a head coach for the first time, is I didn't realize how big the job was. I didn't
Yeah.
realize how much stuff outside of football I had to deal with. And you can't know it until you do it. And Nick's the same way. So he understands the job better. He's adjusted everything from his schedule uh, to calling plays, which would be the most high profile. He scaled back on that. Um, so yeah, he's much more comfortable in year two, and that can only be a help. It can't be a hindrance.
And when Nick Sirianni was hired, we knew he was brought in because he wowed the Eagles in the interview process, and he did have a tie to Frank Reich, who the Eagles liked when he was here, part of the Super Bowl championship team. Um, but he was a wide receiver guy. And year one, they drafted a wide receiver very high, but the other guys who were turning weren't exactly a phenomenal grouping, despite the fact that they took Jalen Reagor in the first round. He had the rookie year that he did. They were hoping for a bust out year in year two. All right, that one didn't happen. I'm not going to put it on Sirianni, but it just flat out didn't happen. Now they had A.J. Brown. How much more fun do you think Sirianni will have working with this wide receiver? Because he hasn't gotten out of his system. When you guys ask him questions about wide receivers, he can go off on a wide receiver tangent like nobody's business. Last year, what was the game? The Giant game?
Giants game, yeah. Yeah, he went
Him
off.
breaking
Yeah.
down what the wide receivers did on that given play
Yeah.
was basically a tutorial on wide receivers in the National Football League. So we know he loves the position, and that was his position, and he's certainly good at talking about it. How much fun do you think he's going to have with this group this year?
I don't think it's about fun as much for him. I think football is fun for him. I
True.
just think he likes everything about football. I think he felt a necessity to work with the receivers last year. Like I would joke in training camp, he'd spend so much time with the receivers. I'd go, he does realize he's the head coach, right? I mean, he's out there. He was pretty much Aaron Moorhead and Nick Sirianni. You could tell he was invested on getting this group better. And I don't know if they got better between you and me. I mean, Devontae's Devontae. And then you could argue Quez Watkins got better, certainly. Jalen Rager, I would argue, went backward. Greg Ward, they didn't utilize. He wasn't. He went backward.
Flatline at best.
I think he's far more comfortable in the younger receivers. The other younger receivers, there's no real development, at least that we saw. So he's going to be more comfortable. Look, you had another. I always said last year, I would say put Devontae Smith off to the side because he's just different than everybody else. Now you have two of those guys. So with A.J. Brown, so he doesn't have to worry about them as much. He's got a guy he's very comfortable with in Zach Pascal. He knows he doesn't have to worry about him. So I think he's going to be less worried about the position and more apt to do his job as the head coach of the entire team. So I think from that standpoint, it's certainly a positive. But I am interested. I want to see some development from these younger guys. And I'm just looking at my roster here. I'm talking about, and I'm not talking about playing, Jody, but whether it's the practice squad or fourth, fifth receiver, the Devin Allens we talked, Britton Covey, Carrick Wheatball, Josh Hammond, John Hightower, Deion Kane. Let's see something. I mean, you're supposed to be the wide receiver guru. Let's get some of these guys up to speed to see if they can help. But we'll see. We'll see how it
Even
works.
though it doesn't seem, at least to me, like there's a lot of roster flexibility there, there's a good chance one of those two guys can make the team as the returner, because I'm not all that jazzed or infused by Rager being the return guy. I don't know if there's room for him. There's certainly room, but I don't know if I would project it or predict it that you're going to get better wide receiver play if he is forced to play this year for the Eagles. Yeah, that's not a bad sentiment, John, that maybe one of these guys who is on the outside looking in and has one path to get in, and it's got to be returned, but then you got to widen your path if you do so. Should be interesting to see if that plays out with the Birds here this offseason. I want to get one more comment in from you on the quarterback rankings. And you we brought it up yesterday, but we went a little further in detail with BLG. The athletics ranking using coaches and executives from around the league, which gives a little bit more gravitas. I think what you said, you can still get it wrong. That doesn't mean because they are quote unquote executives and coach, they can still miss. It's not a guaranteed or a given, but you give them at least the credit that they've earned and deserve because they're in the league and have been handling and viewing these players from up close and personal. Well, the rest of us do this from outside looking in. They had Jalen Hurts ranked as the 20th quarterback coming into the season, tied with Carson Wentz at number 20. Did they have to move the needle to make it a tie? They may very well have, but just for note, in the article itself, they listed Jalen Hurts first. Now, that may be alphabetical order. I don't know why they decided to do it that way, but in case you needed to know, Hurts was first, Carson Wentz was second, even though they were supposedly tied for 20th. All right, who's the guy who's either above Jalen Hurts that you say within the first 5 games of the season? If you remade the list, Jalen Hurts would be higher than he is. Who's the guy who's below Jalen Hurts that you say, yeah, I probably would have had him ahead of Jalen Hurts on the list, so when he goes by him, you won't be surprised at all?
I got to pop up the list real quick. I'm trying to think out of memory. I believe, and if you have the list, tell me if I'm
do.
right.
Here's tier 3 is Cousins, Jimmy G.
Yeah, Jimmy G. Yeah, I mean, he's better right now. He's a better quarterback. than Jimmy Garoppolo.
Really?
Yeah. I don't like Jimmy Garoppolo a little bit. Yeah, it, it, that's one where I go, come on, guys, come on. You're defaulting, and they should know better than anybody else about, how I feel about Kyle Shanahan too. They should know better than anybody else what Kyle Shanahan thinks about Jimmy G and what he's done to sort of mask his deficiencies. There's no way Jalen Hurts should be below Jimmy Garoppolo right now. Never mind 5 games into the season. He's the one guy where I said, come on, come on.
Yeah.
Now, there are other guys behind him, Trevor Lawrence most notably. Look, I get why he's behind him, but I don't think there's any chance by the end of the season that Trevor Lawrence isn't ahead of Jalen Hurts. I don't believe there's any chance. Any chance. That's how much I think of his talent. And I also have a lot of respect for Doug, and I think he'll get him back on the right track. Trevor Lawrence, I'm talking about, obviously. So those are the 2 guys where I went. I get it with Lawrence because what happened last year. It's hard to put him that high, but he's going to get better. And then I was like, where's Goff? Goff's below him, right?
Goff is directly behind both Hurts and Jalen.
That one is more iffy to me than Jimmy, right? Because I think Jared Goff offers a little bit more as a veteran quarterback, but he'll pass him probably early in the season. But I think Goff is better than Garoppolo. But yeah, they got it right for the most part. The tier they got right. By the way, their tier 1 is exactly my tier 1. I'm proud of myself. That tier 1 is exactly my tier 1.
Yeah,
and they put Herbert and Burrow in there, which I was surprised.
I didn't have a problem. I don't have a problem with them putting him in there, but they dropped Russell Wilson. He's been a tier 1 guy for the last several years.
Yeah.
And I know he didn't have as good a season last year. I'll tell you, it was as much the players around him as it was Russell Wilson. No, if you're going to put Russell Wilson in at number 8 and put Stafford in at 7 because you won the Super Bowl this past year, then that's where you draw the line. Then you make tier 1 8 deep rather than 6 deep. I got no problems with either Herbert or Burrow being ranked ahead of him, but I think it's a little bit of a slap in the face to Russell Wilson. And I don't think Russell's the kind of guy.
I don't think there's. I mean, it's a difficult grading scale. I don't have any problem with either. I'm a big Matthew Stafford guy. I have that sort of demarcation line right there because I think those top 6, and we're talking about Rodgers. Rodgers is 1. Always, someday we talk about Father Time. That'll stop. But from the league's perspective, make no mistake about it. I've talked about this for years. Aaron Rodgers is number 1. Then it was, I believe, Mahomes, then Brady, Josh Allen, and then Herbert, Burrow, I believe. I don't know who was ahead of who. In this, I'm going from memory.
Herbert first, Burrow second out of 5, 6. But let me ask you the question. And again, this is your own preference, and I would do it a little bit differently. Where's the bigger drop-off? From Burrow to Stafford or Russell Wilson to Deshaun Watson?
I don't think there's a huge drop-off between either. I mean, Deshaun's incredibly talented. Incredibly. So I don't think there's a big drop off there. The truly elite quarterbacks, probably a little bit more of a drop off. So there's probably a little bit more of a drop off from 6 and 7 there than 8 and 9.
Yeah, wow, I disagree with you there. Russell Wilson's won a Super Bowl, right?
Yeah,
Deshaun Watson has won what?
Yeah, but I, again, we always talk about, and I get it. I fall prey to it as well. Aaron Rodgers has 1. Eli Manning has 2. Does that make Eli Manning a better quarterback than Aaron Rodgers? I mean, it's not even close. It's not even. They're not even in the same universe. it takes other things to win a Super Bowl. There are other people involved. There's luck. Sometimes it's luck. If you look at the Rams, we talk about Tart because he's here now. Think about that razor slim margin of Matthew Stafford turning the corner from what he was regarded as by some in Detroit to being Super Bowl winner. If he throws that interception, those old tropes come back. Well, he can't do this. He can't do that. He's not a star. Now he's a star. I mean, I don't value I value Super Bowl wins. I'm not saying that, but if anybody wants to tell me any of these quarterbacks that have 2 Super Bowls are better than Aaron Rodgers, I'm going to argue with them because I think he's one of the best quarterbacks who's ever lived. I think he's in the conversation with 3 or 4 people. And he's only got one. And I hate that term. Only got one. It's hard to win Super Bowls, and it's not just about the quarterback.
It's not the sole determining factor, and I don't even know if it's the top determining factor, but it's a factor, and it should be a factor because that's what we're all in it for, is to get your team to the biggest game and then be able to have a parade thereafter. So I don't want to overemphasize it. I'm with you there, but I don't want to underemphasize it either. All right, Jody Mac with Johnny Mac at the Mac and Mac guys here on Birds 365. Chris Franklin, NJ.com, next up here on Birds.